So let's talk about the Tanka. The Tanka is the first major Japanese form that Japanese poets wrote in from the Nara period all the way up until the Tokugawa shogunate era when the haiku arose. Now, most people know haiku as the dominant Japanese form, and it is true that haiku has been very important in the history of Japanese poetry. But the older form, and the form that's been practiced a longer time, is the Tanka. Now, a Tanka is a simple poem of 5 lines where the syllable count is 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. So there are 17 syllables in that first section, just like a haiku, and then 14 syllables in the final 2 lines. We could kind of see this as a 3-syllable stanza and a 2-syllable stanza or couplet, but often they're written so it's just those 5 lines in a row. And yet it's easy to discern a first movement of the poem, the 5-7-5, and a second movement of the poem, the 7-7. And sometimes people have thought about the Tanka as kind of setting up an image and then giving a commentary on that image. But different Tanka do different things. Tanka show up in the high Heian period. The Tanka, over the course of the Heian period, becomes a genre in its own right that people like the poet Saigyo become very famous for. Now, Saigyo has an interesting story. We could do a whole episode on him. Saigyo was a nobleman from the ruling family that was falling out of power. And in fact, Saigyo decided that he wanted to retire from court life and become a Buddhist monk. And soon after he does this, his whole family is wiped out by a rival family. And people talk about, there's this escaped just in time sense that Saigyo has. Saigyo goes off into the wilderness and lives in the forest in a cave and writes these beautiful, beautiful Tanka. I want to share 2 of them with you. So I'm going to read this Tanka first in Japanese. My Japanese pronunciation isn't great, but you'll be able to hear some of the sonic things going on. Toku toku to otsuru iwama no koke shimizu kumi hasu mademo naki sumai kana. We have that great opening line of toku toku to. Now, usually this is translated as drip drip it falls, or drip drip it's falling. This is dripping water. So the translation is something like this: drip drip it's falling down from the rocky cleft, pure spring water, barely enough to catch, and yet enough for this home of mine. So the first 3 lines give us this image of the dripping water falling from the rock cleft. And you get that toku toku, so it's onomatopoetic. And then the last 2 lines give this kind of meditation on the water. It's barely enough to get, and yet it's entirely enough. And there's a sense of kind of resignation and giving up the fineries of court life that you often find in Saigyo's poetry. I want to read one more Tanka to give you a feel for what Saigyo and others are writing about in this era. Remembering the past, now, here in this garden, I stack it high as fuel for the new year, the difficult driftwood of truth. So we have this garden scene in the first 3 lines, that we're remembering the past in the garden, stacking wood. But then there's this kind of allegorization of the wood. It's fuel for the new year. And it's not just the physical fuel of the wood, it's the fuel of truth. And this goes along with Saigyo and other Tanka poets' Buddhist idea that the physical world is kind of this illusory image that teaches us about the spiritual world. This is the Tanka. You could write one. They're not very hard to write, and yet there are depths there. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're going to talk about haiku next time.